My name is David Okafor. I am 44 years old, and the first time my wife asked me to cover her mother's electric bill, the amount was $62. I paid it that same afternoon from my phone, while sitting in the parking lot of a water treatment facility in Merrillville, Indiana, because it seemed like the kind of thing you do without thinking twice. That was 19 years ago. By the time I stopped counting, the total had reached $411,814. I know the exact number because calculating contamination levels in municipal water systems is what I have done every working day for the past 22 years. And when you spend your professional life measuring what accumulates invisibly inside things people trust, you tend to notice accumulation everywhere else too, except, apparently, in your own kitchen. Before we go any further, I need to tell you something about how this ends, because you need that context to understand every single thing that comes next. 3 months ago, I sat in a mediation conference room on the 4th floor of the DuPage County Courthouse while my wife's attorney stared at a spreadsheet I had built over 19 years and said, very quietly, "Where did you get these numbers?" I told him I got them the same place I get every number in my professional life, from the source, verified, time-stamped, cross-referenced against every available record. He did not ask me another question for a very long time. Nobody in that room did. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it started. With the $62, Naomi and I met at a regional water quality conference in Indianapolis in the spring of 2005. She was working the registration desk for the hotel hosting the event. I was presenting a paper on trace heavy metal detection in aging lead service lines, a topic that clears rooms at parties, but fills auditoriums at infrastructure conferences. She told me months later that she had not understood a single word of my presentation, but she liked the way I went completely still when I was thinking at the podium. She said most people fidget or shift their weight. I just stopped moving. She said it made her trust whatever I was about to say next. She was right about the stillness. It is the first thing you learn in contamination analysis. When the readings come back wrong, you do not adjust your instrument. You do not shake the sample. You read the number again. You read it a third time. And then you start asking what is upstream. We married in October of 2007. Her family was large and tightly organized. Her mother, Lorraine Mitchell, was the center of every gathering, every decision, every calendar invitation. She coordinated holidays, birthdays, Sunday dinners, school pickups, church fundraisers, and the emotional temperature of every room she entered. She spoke with the authority of someone who had earned the right to manage other people's lives, and for a long time I believed she had earned it. Naomi had 2 older brothers, Marcus and Jerome, and a younger sister, Denise. I was the only spouse who had come from outside their church community, the only one who had not grown up within 10 miles of their family home, and Lorraine made sure I understood that distinction early and often. "We take care of our own in this family," she told me at our wedding reception, holding both of my hands in hers, smiling warmly enough that the words sounded like a welcome. "That is what we do, David. That is what you are part of now." I nodded. I thanked her. I meant it. That was the first entry in the ledger I did not yet know I was keeping. The $62 for the electric bill came 4 months after the wedding. Naomi brought it to me casually, almost apologetically. Her mother's fixed income was tight that month. It would not happen again. I transferred the money without a second thought. Then it was $140 for Lorraine's car insurance premium, because her Social Security check had come late. Then it was $300 for Marcus's daughter's school uniforms, because Marcus was between landscaping jobs again. Then it was $820 for Jerome's transmission repair, because Jerome had just started a new warehouse position and his first paycheck had not arrived yet. Each request arrived through Naomi, always framed as temporary, always framed as family obligation, always delivered with the quiet assurance that this was simply how things worked in her family, and that I should be grateful to be included. That brought the total to $1,422. And we were only in the first half of 2008. I kept records of all of it from the very beginning. Not because I planned to use them someday, not because I suspected anything, because tracking the movement of substances through systems is what I do for a living, and I do it the way I breathe. I have a spreadsheet for my household utilities going back to 2006. I have a spreadsheet for vehicle maintenance. I have a spreadsheet for every water sample I have ever collected professionally. Keeping a simple log of family financial transfers was not suspicion. It was muscle memory: date, amount, recipient, stated reason, repayment status. The repayment column stayed almost entirely blank, but I updated the log with the same clinical neutrality I used in my field reports. Numbers do not require adjectives, they simply require accuracy. Before I take you through what those records eventually revealed, I want to know something. What time is it where you are right now? Because I remember the exact time of every single transaction on that list, not because I memorized them deliberately. Because they are in my files, time-stamped the way every water sample I have ever pulled from a reservoir is time-stamped. Contamination does not care whether you are paying attention, it accumulates regardless. The pattern became a rhythm as steady as a billing cycle. Every quarter, sometimes every 6 weeks, a new need surfaced from somewhere inside Lorraine's household, or from one of her children's households, and every need was routed through Naomi to me. My paycheck was the aquifer the entire family drew from, and nobody ever thought to ask how deep it ran or what would happen when it dropped below the replenishment rate. In 2010, Lorraine needed a new roof. She told Naomi her homeowner's insurance had lapsed the previous year, and the damage from a spring storm was not covered. Naomi sat across from me at our kitchen table on a Thursday evening and explained the situation. The cost was $12,000. I had just received my first significant raise for completing a federal Safe Drinking Water Act compliance audit 3 months ahead of deadline. The entire raise, plus 2 months of our joint savings, went to Lorraine's roof. I watched the transfer confirmation appear on my screen and felt something I did not have a name for yet. Not resentment, not suspicion, more like the faint chemical smell you catch at a treatment plant when a dosing ratio is slightly off. You cannot identify the compound yet, but your training tells you to note the time and keep monitoring. That brought the total to $23,600. In 2012, Marcus approached me directly for the first time. He wanted $7,000 to start a commercial landscaping company. He had business cards already printed. He had a used truck picked out. He promised repayment within 12 months. I gave him the money. 12 months came and went. When I mentioned repayment at Thanksgiving dinner, the room went quiet in a way that told me I had violated a rule nobody had written down, but everyone except me had memorized. Lorraine set her glass of sweet tea down on the table, with a deliberation that made the ice shift audibly. "David," she said, "we do not put price tags on family." Naomi squeezed my knee under the table, which meant the conversation was finished. I ate the rest of my dinner without speaking. That brought the total to $39,200, and we were only in 2012. I wanted to go back to school during that period. I had been accepted into the Environmental Engineering Master's program at Illinois Institute of Technology. The tuition was manageable on my salary alone, but it was not manageable alongside the family's quarterly withdrawals. I deferred enrollment the first year. I deferred again the second year. By the third year, my acceptance expired. I did not tell Naomi. I did not tell anyone. I put the acceptance letter in the bottom drawer of my desk at home and closed it. That same year, I spent 3 weeks in Flint, Michigan, consulting on residential lead service line testing before the crisis became national news. I was pulling samples from kitchen faucets in homes where children had been drinking water nobody had thought to test, and I remember standing in a kitchen on DuPont Street, holding a glass vial of water so clouded with particulate that it looked like skim milk, thinking about how long the contamination had been running through those pipes before anyone bothered to measure it. The system looked fine from the outside, the pressure was normal, the billing was current, but the water was poison and had been for years. I did not connect that thought to my own household. Not consciously. Not then. The professional mind sees contamination in pipes. The personal mind calls it generosity and looks away. By 2015, the total had reached $91,000. Our daughter Amara was 6 years old. I coached her weekend soccer team at the Park District because it was the only part of my week that did not feel like a payment processing center. Naomi and I had not taken a vacation without her family in 4 years. Every trip became a group event, organized entirely by Lorraine, funded almost entirely by me. My name was on the credit card receipts. Lorraine's name was on every itinerary, every restaurant reservation, every hotel room assignment. She once booked herself the suite and put Naomi and me in the standard room across the hall. When I mentioned this to Naomi, she said, "Mama's knees are bad, David. She needs the bathtub." In 2017, Jerome's wife, Angela, was hospitalized for emergency gallbladder surgery, followed by complications that extended her stay to 9 days. Jerome asked me for $15,000 to cover the out-of-pocket balance their insurance did not reach. I did not hesitate. Angela was kind. She was the only person in Naomi's family who had ever asked me a single question about my work. She once sat next to me at a 4th of July barbecue and listened for 40 minutes while I explained how chloramine disinfection byproducts differ from chlorine byproducts in distribution systems. She asked follow-up questions, real ones. I covered the hospital bill and did not add it to the spreadsheet for 3 days because something about the transaction felt different from the others. It felt like something I had chosen freely, not something routed through Lorraine's system. That brought the total to $148,000. Then came the request that should have stopped everything. In the spring of 2019, Lorraine announced she was buying a new house. Not a house she needed, a house she wanted. 4 bedrooms, a sunroom with southern exposure, a yard large enough for her church garden club to hold their annual planting event. She had found the listing herself, had already attended 2 open houses, and had made an offer contingent on financing. The down payment gap she could not cover was $42,000. Naomi came to me on a Wednesday evening, sat across from me at our kitchen table with her hands folded, and said, "Mama needs help with the house, David." I was updating Amara's 529 college savings projections on my laptop when she said it. The balance in our daughter's education fund was $11,216. Amara was 10 years old. 7 years from college applications. I held my coffee mug with both hands and did not move for a very long time. My eyes stayed on the screen, but I was not reading it. Something inside me was running calculations I had not consciously initiated. The ratio of cumulative family transfers against cumulative savings for my own daughter's future was approximately 13 to 1. $13 flowing out of our household for every single dollar I had managed to set aside for Amara's education. I held the mug so tightly the ceramic edge pressed a white line across my palm. I did not speak. I did not move. I was measuring. Then I closed the laptop, took a breath, and said, "How much exactly?" Naomi told me. I transferred $42,000 to Lorraine's designated account the following Friday morning while parked in the lot of a wastewater reclamation plant in Aurora, Illinois. The irony of the location did not register at the time. That brought the total to $219,000, and we were only in 2019. I should tell you about the one thing the total did not account for. I will get there. But first, let me tell you about the year the water finally turned cloudy enough that even I could not keep calling it clear. In January of 2022, I was conducting a routine compliance audit for a small municipality 40 miles southwest of Chicago when I found something that made me stop moving at my desk. The town had been submitting monthly filtration performance reports to the state, showing full regulatory compliance. The reports looked correct, dates formatted properly. Signature blocks matched the authorized personnel list. Certification numbers valid. But when I pulled the PDF metadata as part of standard verification protocol, every single report from the previous 14 months showed the same creation date. All 14 files had been generated on a single afternoon, 6 weeks before my audit began. Someone had fabricated over a year of compliance documentation in one sitting. I flagged the discrepancy. I identified the specific error that exposed it. The file author field in the document properties listed a name that did not match the person whose signature appeared on the reports. The person who created the files was not the person who supposedly signed them. The documents were almost correct. Almost perfect, really. But almost correct in contamination work means the system is compromised. I reported my findings. The State Environmental Agency opened a formal investigation within 10 days. The town's public works director was placed on administrative leave within a month. That skill, reading metadata, cross-referencing authorship, identifying the single small flaw in an otherwise convincing fabrication, had protected municipal water systems across 3 states for 22 years. It was about to dismantle my own family from the inside out. 3 weeks after that audit closed, I was sitting at the dining room table, helping Amara with a financial literacy assignment for her 8th grade college prep course. She needed to analyze a real household budget as a class exercise. I pulled 12 months of our joint checking account statements, printed them, and spread them across the table between us. That was when I saw the first transfer I had never authorized, $2,200, sent to a routing number I did not recognize. On a date when I had been collecting samples in downstate Illinois for 3 consecutive days. There was no memo line, no corresponding bill, no notation anywhere in our household records. I did not react visibly. I told Amara I needed to grab a different printout from my office. I walked down the hall, closed my office door, and sat in my desk chair. I opened 18 months of joint account statements on my computer screen. I did not blink for a long time. I was reading the numbers the way I read contamination data, not looking for what I expected to find, looking for what the pattern was trying to tell me. There were 14 more unauthorized transfers across the 18-month period, small amounts by individual measure, $800, $1,200, $1,500, $2,200, always round figures, always routed to the same account number, always dated to windows when my travel calendar showed me out of state. The extraction pattern was clean, systematic, and precisely timed. It was invisible to anyone who was not professionally trained to identify the methodical removal of resources from a shared system. I called our bank the following morning at 7:45 from my truck, parked outside a treatment facility in Joliet. I verified the destination routing number through 3 separate confirmation steps. The account belonged to Lorraine Mitchell. Layer 1 was the surface insult. I had been voluntarily giving this family money for 19 years, hundreds of thousands of dollars transferred openly, willingly, without argument, without conditions. And it had not been enough. Someone had been taking more while I was not looking. I spent the next 2 weeks going through every joint account statement from the previous 5 years with the same methodical attention I bring to contamination chronologies. The unauthorized transfers totaled $63,400. I cross-referenced every transfer date against my professional travel calendar, which I maintain in duplicate because field audit regulations require it. Every single unauthorized withdrawal occurred during a documented out-of-state work trip. The correlation was perfect, 100%. I accessed our bank's online security portal and reviewed the IP and device login records associated with each transfer. They originated from our home network. But the browser profile used was not Naomi's primary login. It was a secondary profile, created 11 months before the first unauthorized transfer appeared, registered under an email address I had never seen. Layer 2 was the hidden architecture. This was not carelessness or confusion. Someone had created a dedicated login profile, linked it to a separate email, and used it exclusively to initiate transfers timed to my professional absences. The planning was deliberate. The execution was disciplined. The concealment was almost professional. I still did not confront Naomi. My training does not allow premature conclusions. When you find contamination in one part of a system, you trace it upstream before you issue any findings. You map the full pathway first. I contacted Lorraine's mortgage servicer. I identified myself as a financial reference listed on her original mortgage application, which was true because she had used my name and income verification when applying for the loan on the house I had funded the down payment for. I requested a payment history. What I received showed that Lorraine's monthly mortgage obligation was $1,700, but her actual payments had been averaging only $1,100. The shortfall had been compounding for over 2 years. She was 93 days from formal default. The $42,000 I had given her for the down payment was intact in the home's equity, but the house itself was being lost through accumulated payment deficiency. Someone was supposed to be covering the full monthly amount. That someone was not covering it. Which raised a question my professional mind could not leave unanswered. If Lorraine was receiving $63,000 in unauthorized transfers from my account over this same period, plus whatever direct support I was providing through Naomi voluntarily, where was the money actually going? Layer 3 was the older architecture beneath the current one. I pulled Lorraine's property tax records from the county assessor's office, which are public documents available to anyone who requests them. She had owned a previous home before the current one, the house she had lived in when I first married Naomi. That house had gone through foreclosure proceedings in 2018, 1 year before she purchased the new property with my $42,000 down payment. The foreclosure filing listed outstanding encumbrances, including a second mortgage originated in 2014, co-signed by Marcus. The proceeds of that second mortgage totaled $81,000. The disbursement records showed those proceeds deposited into an account with a routing number I now recognized instantly. The same account, Lorraine's account, the one receiving my unauthorized transfers. Lorraine had been cycling debt through family members for at least a decade, possibly longer. The first home was leveraged, drained, and lost. The second home was being drained through the identical mechanism, and the engine that kept the entire cycle operational across both properties, across both decades, was my income. My labor. My samples collected in freezing water treatment plants at 6 in the morning. My weekends away from Amara. My deferred degree. I sat in my truck in the parking lot outside the Joliet facility for 45 minutes after assembling the full chronology. My hands rested on the steering wheel. The engine was off. I was not driving anywhere. I was not thinking in complete sentences. Something inside me had become perfectly still in the way I go still when a contamination reading returns at 10 times the actionable threshold, and I know the entire system needs to be shut down. Not repaired, not monitored. Shut down and rebuilt from the source. Layer 4 was the thing the total had never accounted for. When I traced the account documentation one level further, requesting the account's signature card through a formal records request, I discovered that Lorraine's extraction account carried 2 authorized signers. The first was Lorraine Mitchell. The second was not Marcus. It was not Jerome. It was Naomi Okafor, my wife. She had been co-signer on her mother's account for 7 years. Every unauthorized transfer from our joint checking account during my work absences had been initiated by someone with full legal authority on both ends of the transaction. My wife had been moving my money to her mother's account with the administrative ease of someone transferring funds between her own accounts, because, legally, that is exactly what she was doing. Every conversation Naomi had ever had with me about her mother needing a little help was reframed in that single discovery. The voluntary transfers I had made for 19 years were the visible current. The unauthorized transfers were the hidden one, and both currents fed the same reservoir. I spent 4 additional weeks building the complete documentation package. I exported bank records, IP login histories, browser profile creation timestamps, mortgage payment chronologies, property tax filings, foreclosure records, second mortgage origination documents, and the signature card showing dual authorization. I assembled everything into a contamination pathway analysis, formatted identically to the ones I submit to state regulators. Date, source, pathway, receptor, concentration, duration of exposure. Except the contaminant was money leaving my household, and the receptor was every dream I had deferred to keep the system running. Then I filed for divorce. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in mid-October. Naomi's attorney, Franklin Yates, submitted standard discovery motions and a spousal support request describing Naomi as the primary homemaker who had sacrificed career development to maintain the household during our marriage. My attorney, Gabriella Rice, told me to bring everything. I brought 3 binders, color-tabbed, cross-indexed, and organized chronologically. The mediation conference room on the 4th floor had fluorescent lighting and a long oak table, polished so many times the wood grain had gone nearly invisible. Naomi sat on the far side with Franklin Yates. Lorraine was seated behind them in the gallery row, wearing a lavender blouse with pearl buttons, her hands folded in her lap. Marcus sat beside her. They looked composed. They looked like people who had been in rooms where money was discussed before, and had always left with more than they entered with. Naomi did not look at me when I sat down. She looked at the wall behind the mediator's chair. Franklin Yates spoke first. He described our marriage as a cooperative partnership in which Naomi had subordinated her own professional aspirations to maintain our household and support my career. He described me as financially rigid. He used the phrase, transactional approach to family relationships. He said I had maintained obsessive spreadsheets, tracking family generosity, as though love were an accounting exercise. Naomi nodded at every point. She still did not look at me. When it was our turn, Gabriella did not make a speech. She opened the first binder and placed a single spreadsheet on the table. It was the running total. Every entry, every date, every amount, every recipient, every stated reason. 19 years, $411,814. She asked me to read selected line items aloud. I read 12 entries in a flat voice. I stated dates. I stated amounts. I stated the reason given at the time of each transfer. I did not editorialize. I did not raise my voice. I did not look at Naomi or Lorraine. I read the numbers the way I read contamination chronologies to regulatory panels. Clearly, slowly, with the understanding that precision is always more convincing than volume. Franklin Yates interrupted after the 6th entry. Your Honor, this is simply a family providing mutual support. There is nothing irregular about financial assistance between relatives. Gabriella placed the second binder on the table. She opened it to the unauthorized transfers section. 14 transactions, dates, amounts, destination routing number, IP login records, secondary browser profile creation date. Naomi's expression shifted, not dramatically, the way a pressure gauge needle moves 1 degree when something changes upstream. Small. But if you have spent your career watching gauges, unmistakable. Those were household management transfers, Naomi said. I moved money between accounts for bills. Gabriella placed the bank's device login records beside the transfer chronology. She placed the secondary browser profile creation timestamp beside both documents. Household management, Gabriella said, does not typically require a concealed login profile, created 11 months in advance, and used exclusively during the other party's documented professional travel absences. Lorraine shifted in the gallery. Marcus leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. David has always been this way, Naomi said. He tracks everything. He audits our family the same way he audits his water plants. This is exactly the kind of controlling behavior I have been dealing with for years. After everything I have done for this family, Lorraine said from the gallery, loud enough for the entire room to register, this is the gratitude I receive. We welcomed this man. We treated him like our own. Not here, Mama, Naomi said quietly. He should be ashamed of himself, Lorraine continued, putting dollar amounts on family love. The mediator asked for order. Gabriella opened the third binder without acknowledging the interruption. It contained Lorraine's mortgage payment history for both properties, the second mortgage co-signed by Marcus, the 2018 foreclosure, the current arrearage, and the signature card for the account with 2 authorized names, Lorraine Mitchell, Naomi Okafor. Before Gabriella had finished her summary, someone spoke from the back of the room. Angela, Jerome's wife, She had come alone, without telling Jerome, carrying a manila folder she had brought from her own home. "I can confirm this pattern," Angela said, addressing the mediator directly. In 2016, Jerome co-signed a personal loan for Lorraine, totaling $14,000. We were told the funds were for Lorraine's medical expenses. I later discovered the money was used to cover delinquent payments on the second mortgage Marcus had co-signed 2 years earlier. When I confronted Jerome, Lorraine told him I was attempting to destroy the family. Jerome and I separated for 5 months over it. I kept every document. I have the original loan paperwork, Lorraine's written request to Jerome, and Jerome's bank statements showing the disbursement. Angela placed her folder on the table beside Gabriella's binders. She looked at Lorraine. Lorraine's hands were no longer folded. They were gripping the edges of her seat. Marcus stared at the floor. He did not look up for the remainder of the session. I looked across the table at Naomi. She was finally looking back at me. "You did not need my help," I said. "You needed my account." I said nothing else. I did not elaborate. I did not explain what I meant. The documents had already said everything that required saying. The mediator reviewed all 3 binders and Angela's submitted records over the following 4 days. The preliminary recommendation was issued the next Tuesday. The court found that significant marital assets had been systematically diverted without mutual consent. The $63,400 in unauthorized transfers was classified as dissipation of marital property. My 19-year documentation of voluntary transfers was entered into the formal record as evidence of sustained marital estate depletion. Within 3 weeks of the preliminary finding, Lorraine's mortgage servicer initiated formal default proceedings on her home. The accumulated arrearage had exceeded the contractual cure period. Lorraine retained an attorney to contest the foreclosure, but could not sustain legal fees beyond the initial filing. The house was listed for forced sale in December. Marcus's landscaping company, the one launched with my $7,000 12 years earlier, lost its largest commercial maintenance contract when the client's accounting department flagged Marcus's personal credit report during a routine vendor review. The co-signed loan default with Lorraine appeared as a derogatory mark. The client cited financial reliability concerns in a 2-sentence termination letter. Marcus did not call me. I did not call him. There was nothing remaining that required words between us. Naomi moved into Lorraine's house during the proceedings. When the forced sale was finalized in January, Naomi moved into a rental apartment on the west side. Her attorney contacted Gabriella to ask whether I would cover the security deposit. Gabriella sent a 1-sentence reply. "Mr. Okafor's financial obligations are limited to those specified by court order." Denise, Naomi's younger sister, called me 6 weeks after the final hearing. She had been completely silent through the entire process. She attended no hearings, she made no phone calls, she offered no opinions publicly, but she had watched the documents circulate within the family. She had seen the spreadsheet totals, the transfer records, the mortgage chronologies. "I suspected something was wrong for a long time," she told me. "Years. I watched the money move, and I watched everyone pretend it was normal, and I did not say anything, because saying something would have meant Mama stopped speaking to me." I waited a long time before I responded. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. "Yes," I said. "You should have said something." She did not ask for forgiveness. I did not offer any. But she began checking on Amara, once a week after that conversation, and in 19 months, she has never once asked me for money. The final settlement awarded me the family home, joint legal and physical custody of Amara, and a restitution order requiring Naomi to repay $63,400 over a 7-year period. The spousal support petition was denied based on the dissipation findings. Naomi's attorney did not appeal. Amara turned 14 the month the settlement was finalized. She asked me one Saturday morning if we could visit the Shed Aquarium downtown. She had not asked to go anywhere recreational in more than a year. I said yes before she finished the sentence. We stood together in front of the freshwater ecosystem exhibit for a long time. watching the filtration system cycle clean water through a tank where slow-moving sunfish drifted between rocks. The water was so clear you could see individual grains of substrate on the tank floor. Amara pressed her hand against the glass. "Dad, is that the kind of thing you do at work?" I told her it was close enough. She watched the filter intake for another minute. "It is really clean in there," she said. I told her that someone works very hard every single day to keep it that way. She nodded like she understood I was not only talking about the fish tank. I re-enrolled in the Environmental Engineering Master's program at Illinois Tech the following January. The tuition had increased substantially since my original 2012 acceptance. I could afford it now, because nothing was leaving my account that I had not personally reviewed, authorized, and chosen. The first assignment I completed was a full contamination pathway analysis for a hypothetical compromised municipal distribution system. My professor gave me full marks and wrote in the margin, "Unusually thorough source documentation for a first semester submission." I did not explain why my sourcing instincts were so well developed. Some skills you earn in laboratories, some you earn at kitchen tables. What I understand now, standing on the far side of all of this, is something I could not have articulated clearly while I was still living inside the contaminated system. A running total on paper looks like numbers, dates and dollar signs arranged in columns, with a repayment field that stays empty year after year after year. But what a spreadsheet cannot capture is what accumulates in the invisible spaces between the entries. The slow, compounding erosion of trusting your own judgment. The quiet habit of asking yourself whether generosity and obligation are actually the same thing, and then never finishing the thought because finishing it would require you to act. The way you stop noticing that the water tastes different because you have been drinking from that source for so long that the contamination has become your baseline. $411,814. That is what the final column says. But the ledger does not include the master's degree I deferred twice until the acceptance expired in a desk drawer. It does not include the family vacations Amara never took, because every trip became a group event organized by someone else and funded by me. It does not include the 13-to-1 ratio between what I sent to other people's households and what I saved for my own daughter's future. Those numbers do not appear on any spreadsheet, but they accumulated just as surely as lead in an untested pipe. Consequences are not revenge. They are what was always owed. Not owed to me personally, but owed to the reality of what occurred. Every number I documented existed long before I wrote it down. The spreadsheet did not create the contamination, it made the contamination measurable. And once it was measurable, every person who encountered the data had to decide what to do with what they could finally see. Some chose accountability, some chose silence. Denise is still deciding, one weekly phone call to my daughter at a time. I do not rush her. Decontamination is not an event. It is a process, and it moves at its own speed. Last Tuesday evening, I sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where I once closed my laptop and transferred $42,000 to a woman who had my wife tell me it was for family. I opened my bank statement on my screen. The balance was modest. It was not a dramatic figure, but every dollar shown had been deposited by me, allocated by me, and spent on purposes I selected with full knowledge and clear intention. I closed the laptop. I poured Amara a glass of water from the under-sink filter I installed myself on a Sunday afternoon when no one needed anything from me. The water was clean. I had tested it. If you sat down tonight and added up everything you have given to the people who call you family, not in gratitude, but in debt, what would the total be? And what would you do if you finally saw it written down? This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, education, and dramatic reflection. We hope it reminded you that your dignity is not negotiable, and that setting a boundary, even a painful one, can be an act of love for yourself and everyone the pattern would have reached next.